So, one of the things I've always just found like super interesting, like the last, especially the last month or so, is just how like disconnected everybody is. I mean, it's something that's kind of like almost like intuitive to everybody. Like if you ask the average person, like, does social media actually connect people? Like, they might like, be like, I don't know, but like they're in their back of their mind, they're gonna be like, yeah, we all know that it doesn't fucking work the way that people thought it might. It has its benefits, but there's a point where we're at now where we're basically just like taking for granted the idea of talking to people as if they're actually people the same way we are. And that we kind of like see everybody as like almost caricatures of like, the people they actually are. Like they're representations, they're symbols of certain ideas, certain hobbies, certain favorite games, favorite shows, favorite whatever, fandoms. Like, they're not actually like people who also like feel fear or sadness or depression or, you know, anger or happiness or joy like we do, right? And it like this is not something that I'm kind of like trying to like proselytize about. It's some shit that I did myself, and I kind of like probably still do, but I just don't notice. I'm only like just now like thinking about this idea a lot and trying to apply it because like there are like over the last few years especially, again, like almost every single problem I had with anybody could have been solved by just realizing that we're all like people, and that we're people who can be idiots sometimes, or people who can get scared and not want to do something even if we should sometimes, or people that are sometimes incapable of doing things because of problems that other people may not be able to see, because we all have problems that people can't see. I mean, there are plenty of things that people will never know about me, and there's things that I will never know about other people, or even things that they will know about me but they'll never understand. You can tell somebody about something, but it doesn't mean they're actually going to understand what it is. But even when not understanding something, it's a lot easier to at least like get past it when you realize that it's okay even if you don't understand something, and that doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist just because you don't understand it. And that's kind of like trust, right? But I think that that's kind of lost in this kind of like online sphere. And when I was a kid, I was like a big advocate for like online friends. Like I was like, online friends are like the reason I didn't kill myself, which is probably true. Yeah, like, even to this day, I mean, I don't deny that like if I didn't have Discord and I didn't meet people on there, I likely would have gone down at least like maybe if not suicide, a much worse route than I did. And I already went down a pretty rough patch. So, I mean, like, but I was able to get through it along, like, a big part because I had the people on Discord. But, back then I also had the idea that, like, it was somehow, like, no different than in-person communication. Like, actually, people who say that you should not only have online friends or just, they don't understand, man. I'm like 14 or whatever. That I was a moron. That's the stupidest idea ever. It's totally different. It's totally different. I don't think it's, I guess I could concede that I don't think it's as different as some people may think, but it's very different still. I mean, you can just think about it intuitively, right? The thing is that a lot of people, um, again, it's much harder to get on a call with somebody than like to just be in the same room as somebody and start talking to them. That's one thing. It takes more effort and energy to do that, and so a lot of people just don't end up calling with each other, and they end up just texting instead. And with texts, you don't not only do you not get voice, you don't get anybody's face either, anybody's facial expressions, anybody's like movements, any kind of signs like that, any cues that could make it clear what somebody might actually be thinking or meaning or intending when they say something. So when you can't add that kind of emotion or that kind of understanding between two human beings when you're just writing a text message, because that text message could like for all we know it could be written by AI, right? Like it's so difficult to actually know like that this is you're talking to a real person who may have been smiling when they typed this message or laughing when they typed this message, or they may have been like anxious when they typed this message or upset when they did. Sometimes you can tell, but usually for me at least, I'm only usually able to tell when it's really bad, like when it's so obviously bad that like there's nobody could miss what the person is feeling. But those are in like the worst moments, and those are the moments that by that time it's too late, right? Because those moments can very, I mean, for me, especially like recently, like were caused by my inability to understand shit until it got to the point where the other person got really, really upset. And that's when I realized that I'm an idiot, right? But at that point, you need to realize it earlier so then you don't do the fucking stupid shit in the first place, right? So, really, the solution that I've kind of thought of, and there really is no good solution to this. I mean, the only solution in that's like, foolproof is just for everybody to get friends in real life, which I don't really have a ton of. But I don't really think I need a ton of them. I just need some of them. And I don't think anybody needs a ton of them. But I think that a lot of people have the idea that they don't need any of them. At least I did as a kid. You definitely do. And I think that anybody saying otherwise is ridiculous. But not only like have in-person, friends, stuff like that, which I'd hope that most people at least have a couple. You'd hope, right? But I mean, I can't be sure at this point. Um, the thing I've been kind of trying to do is like I've been basically starting to show my face basically anytime I can. So if I like record, for example, the other day, my friend was, they needed like, they were about to take, the AP pre-calculus exam, for the end of their senior year. And they needed like, they were asking like, I don't understand how unit circles work, right? So I was like, okay, I'll make a video on Desmos where I show unit circles because on Desmos you can just draw the unit circle and like show the values like this is what this means or whatever. But when I did that, I turned on my camera and I didn't have to do that. I could have easily just recorded like screen recorded Desmos. I didn't have to turn on my camera with OBS, but I did, and I put the effort in to do that to create a new layout to do that because I think that that's really important even if you're just like listening to me explain what a unit circle is and like how that shit works with the fucking trig functions, you're seeing me talk about it, right? You're seeing like if I'm talking about that shit, you can see that I'm clearly like kind of into it or kind of excited to talking about it. Obviously, as like a STEM major, you can kind of see that. You don't have to just know that fact. You could see it. You could see it when I talk about it. I look like I am excited about what I'm talking about. That's like very valuable because then when there's problems, and that's the most important part, when there's problems, you know that there's somebody behind the screen. When you see them, you don't just have to imagine because like you can. I mean, it's people say like yeah, I can imagine somebody's behind the screen, but one thing I kind of realized that I can't really. I kind of thought I could, but then there were so many moments where if I really did think that there was somebody behind the screen, I would have been a little more trusting. I would have been a little less ridiculous with what I said sometimes. So even if I thought I knew that there was somebody behind the screen, it was almost the idea of somebody and not an actual person. Like I'm like there's somebody behind the screen. But kind of do I know what they look like? No. Do I even really know what they sound like as much anymore? No. Because I mean a lot of people don't have time to talk on calls anymore. And I mean that's fine. But like that causes that kind of issue, right? So yeah, I can imagine that there's somebody there, but I can't really, at least in any meaningful detail. So it's almost like, just like a void where that person should be. And then when that happens, at least for me, it's like really difficult to treat that person like they should be treated. And so that's why I started doing that. And I think I'm going to continue doing that. And I want to do more voice calls as well. Obviously, I think a lot of people, especially some of my friends or whatever, they like basically have trouble scheduling voice stuff or whatever. I've kind of gotten a little bit disillusioned with the idea of even scheduling them at all. I think that maybe it should just be like a time where like people just like want to do it. I don't know if it should always be scheduled a week in advance. Like maybe you should just ask that day of sometimes because it's like really hard. I mean, I understand it. It's not as bad for me, but like, my one friend with bad ADHD says they hate, following schedules. And I mean, I get that because I actually have the same problem. It's just usually I'm able to get past it. But yeah, for me, when I have something scheduled for like a few days from now, like it's hard for those few days before it because sometimes I'll just like start to not really feel like it anymore or something will happen. And then, so like, I think that people should just start like being more casual about it, not have to like schedule everything like it's a meeting or something. You know what I mean? I think that like people have to become more casual and open in general. I mean, it's like, the whole thesis here. I mean, the idea is just like show your face, show your voice, be yourself, say shit if it's embarrassing. Obviously, you don't have to tell every fucking secret of your life, but don't be afraid to like, talk about what shit you like or like, like what stupid like, like indie show you're big into or whatever. Like, I'm sure there's like a lot of people out there who are probably embarrassed to admit that they like object shows or like, like glitch shows or stuff like that just kind of has like a bad reputation in some circles. But like at that point you're just, you're taking yourself and you're minimizing it. You got to be willing to say what the fuck you're into. What do you want to do? Like who are you, right? Don't be like, I have to be, just like a faceless, like non-person who just, does things that I think people want me to. You have to be you. Be you. Smile about the shit that you smile about, laugh about the shit that you laugh about, and don't be like, I'm not allowed to do that. Of course you're allowed to do that. And I think that everybody should be willing to see that and willing to show it. I don't think that it means that you have to show your face to everybody. But when it comes to like somebody you actually want to be friends with, I think you should. And I think that everybody should. And I think that everybody should constantly. Now, maybe people don't have to take it to the degree that I plan to, but I really, really hate how the future is going to look if people don't do it. I think that this is like, in lieu of just somehow being able to get everybody together in the same room all the time, which is never going to happen. This is the way to do it. If you, especially for connecting with online friends, which I think is necessary. Again, as a kid, I did, and that it probably could have saved my life or contributed to it. So I don't think it's unnecessary, but I think that it needs to change, right? And I think people need to start doing it at least the same way I'm doing it, but maybe not to the same degree. Again, it depends on the person, but people need to start showing their faces again. People need to be willing to put themselves out there. Not always, going on a stage and performing or, like something like that where you're putting yourself out in the most ridiculous way possible, but at least being willing to admit things about yourself, your flaws, your interests, stuff like that, just stuff that like, you'd really want people to know. And also to be able to show what makes you expressive, right? Be willing to show that to people, not just tell them that you like something, but let them see it on your face. They don't just know you like something because you said I like this. That you were watching it with them and they told and that you could see on their face as they were laughing at one of the jokes or just like being interested and invested in the show or talking about it. You can see in their face that they really enjoy it. That tells you that that person is actually that they actually do that. The words just don't convey it the same way as just seeing it. I think that everybody needs to do this, and I mean I hope that people do.